going to be over a lot of the just pretty much your military experience and especially following 9/11.
Okay.
So, first thing I need is could you just state your first and last name and date of birth?
Yeah. Barrett Gapp. It's 6/26/1974.
Okay, and then are you currently enlisted or have you ever been enlisted in the U.S. military?
I am not currently enlisted. I am a commissioned officer. I was enlisted in for 14 years.
All right. Could you give a little bit of background as to how you happened to join the military and what branch you were in?
Yeah, I joined the military. I enlisted in 1999 into the Air National Guard. So that's a branch of service of the Air Force, except within the jurisdiction of the state of South Dakota. So we serve dual purpose so that we serve the state and we also serve when the president calls on our unit. Then we would serve for national defense as well.
And what was your current situation too when you enlisted? Like, what caused you to join the military?
Well, at the time I was graduating college, I didn't really have a job, and I was going to have to start paying my loans back. So I was going to join the active duty, and then I found out about the National Guard, and so I called them, and then after talking with them for a short time, I enlisted. So it was really, I had always kind of considered military service, but never really had anything really push me towards it until then.
All right. Could you kind of describe what basic was like for you? Just a few experiences and everything with that?
Sure. Well, I was a bit older than most of the other people going through, so I was 24. Everyone else was, because I went to basic training in February, and in the Air Force, basic training is all in San Antonio, Texas. But most of the people that I was training with were 17, 18, and 19-year-old people, so I was a little bit older. A lot of it, they essentially have a process to train new airmen, and that process is the first couple of weeks is to tear you down, the second couple of weeks is to build you back up as a team, and then the last 2 weeks is to prepare you to enter the Air Force. So the first couple of weeks, is a lot of do things exactly the way we tell you. If you don't do it that way, we're going to yell at you until you do.
Yeah.
And kind of everybody gets that treatment. But you kind of learn quickly, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So you listen twice as much as you speak. And that you quickly learn that. And, some people do. I learned that very quickly, and I was kind of advised by some people before I went. If you can graduate from basic training and they don't know your name, then you've really succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
So you try to find ways to get what you need to get done, and then there's leadership opportunities that evolve out of the situation.
Yeah.
As you grow, some people kind of lean towards it, some others lean away from it, but you have to make sacrifices and take risks while you're there, and that's kind of what it amounted to.
And with basic too, it's kind of a little bit of a nerve-wracking experience. Once you say just kind of going into it, you're not really sure what to expect. Would you have any?
Yeah, it was a little bit nerve-wracking, but it wasn't. The first couple days was pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
So that was because I missed my family and I, didn't really have any connection. And it was before the cell phone, so our only way to communicate was I think we got 3 phone calls back to home during that time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't very easy. You could probably have called more, but you would have had to go through the gauntlet of getting yelled at, trying to get to the phones, because that was you didn't have very much free time. So when you did have free time, if you weren't putting your locker together, you could try to go make a call, but you had to go outside to do that because the phone booths were all outside. So if you walked out there, everything had to be perfect, and somebody had to go with you. You couldn't go out there by yourself. So I only made a few calls.
Earlier, you stated that you enlisted in 1999, correct?
Yep, January.
So then, September 2001, of course, 9/11 attacks. I mean, what was kind of the situation at the time with you and just kind of the atmosphere around the military, too, with that?
Well, it was pretty crazy because so I was not quite 2 years enlisted. I had already gotten to the rank of E3, which in the Air Force is Airman First Class, and actually I was going to be promoted to Senior Airman very quickly. I think actually I may have already been promoted to Senior Airman at the time, so I was an E4. So that's still pretty low-ranking person.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, we had actually had a deployment coming up. And it was a 2-week training, or basically not just 2 weeks, it was actually about 45 days training. But some of us were only going there for 2 weeks. But the training was supposed to be in the end of October, and we were going to go to Prince Sultan Air Force Base. Because at the time, there was something called Operation Northern Watch and Operation Southern Watch going on. And what that was the protection of the no-fly zones over Iraq. So we were already planning on going to Saudi Arabia at the end of October. And so when September 11th happened, obviously, the attack on the towers, it was devastating. I mean, I just couldn't believe what was happening. And especially with, as a young enlisted troop, I didn't really know everything, but, we kind of have ideas that what the military's perspective is on situations. At that time, it was like, we got a job to do, and we knew it. People enlisted and came to join the ranks not long after September 11th. I mean, people wanted to be part of the military to do what they needed to do. I mean, it was a strong, people were compelled to join the military to do their part. And I remember a few hours after the attacks happened, I called back to my shop and said, I'm going to do whatever I have to do. If they need me, make sure you call me. But they didn't at that time. But we did have some people from our unit sent over within a few weeks over to Central Command, basically to the West Asia.
Mm-hmm.
But our training mission and our mission to Southern Watch in Saudi Arabia still was on schedule. So at the end of October, I went to Saudi Arabia I was there for just over 15 days, and then I returned. And when I got there, I mean, security was really heavy.
Yeah.
Obviously, the attackers came from Saudi Arabia, most of them, and we had to carry our chem suits around wherever we went. We had to be within a minute of our chem suits, and we had to carry our gas masks with us wherever we went. And we weren't necessarily armed because that wasn't what my mission was, but we were in the facility was already a secured facility. So it wasn't like they weren't already prepared. I mean, most of the combat operations in the first Persian Gulf War were launched from that area. I mean, the air war was. So I mean, it was already a high target location. So it was pretty intense to be in the middle of Saudi Arabia only a couple months after September 11th.
Mm-hmm.
My roommate was actually an active duty guy from New York City, and when I got there, he had just gotten the first opportunity to call home and found out that his sister had survived because his sister worked in the Twin Towers. So he had, I mean, like the week before I got there, he had not talked to his family to even know whether or not his family was still alive.
Wow, so, yeah.
it was pretty tense, obviously, and you know, there's lots of interesting stuff that went on. You know, obviously nothing, you know, because of this situation, and you know, some things that you don't realize when you go to another country is how different the laws are. And how significantly different it can be is for somebody from Saudi Arabia. When you are a Saudi, you can do whatever you want. There's really no laws. And what would happen is, you know, there would be highways, and we'd have to travel those highways to get to where we were staying, to where the actual work location was about 6 miles away. And so our bus, we'd get on a bus and we'd travel there. Well, during that time, we would have to enter a major highway, and if a car flashed its lights, you had to get off the road so it could go by, and usually it was going 120, 150 miles per hour, just going down the road. And so you had to get out of the way. Well, I wasn't driving the bus, but we would see cars go by us at 120, 150 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Well, there was a car accident while we were there. A Saudi person ran into a car, and the person who was driving the car was an airman, was transporting the vehicle from where the work facility was to back to where our dorms were. And he was actually obeying the laws, and he came to a stop. He looked down the road, and there wasn't anybody coming or anybody that he could see, and he started to cross the road. Well, somebody who was driving 150 miles per hour came so quickly he couldn't even react. He started crossing the road. The guy hit him and almost killed him. The driver was killed. It was an international incident while we were there.
Mm-hmm. And
so,
yeah, that was crazy. Only 2 weeks you stayed, right?
Yeah. Well, and another interesting thing is that not well known is that the Bin Laden family is a very well known, well respected family in Saudi Arabia, and they own pretty much all of the construction companies. So if anything's getting built, it was built by the Bin Laden Industries, including our facility. And so not 2 weeks out, I was there just a little over a month after September 11th, and when I first landed, and we're driving off this facility, and there's a sign built by Bin Laden Industries.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many deployments did you have after 9/11?
Well, including that one, I guess I went to Saudi Arabia. I went to Turkey for Operation Northern Watch because that was still going on until the invasion of Iraq. And then I went 3 times to Iraq.
Mm-hmm. Just part of your service overseas too. I mean, could you just tell a few stories of maybe just some of the highs and the lows while you were overseas?
Well, I guess I don't know what you mean by highs and lows.
Like, maybe just some of the positive things that probably did come out of the entire experience, and then, yeah, just maybe a few of the things that you look back at and you're like, man, I'm happy I wasn't back at that time?
Well, I guess some of the hardest things were being gone from family. I was fortunate enough to not see direct combat. When I went overseas, I was stationed at a place called Balad Air Force Base. It's about 60 miles roughly north of Baghdad, and that's where I went the 3 times I was in Iraq. It was surreal, to say the least, because you just it's just different. I can't really explain it beyond that. We were fortunate, like I said. We were not the Marines. We were not the Army. We did not invade cities or go house to house. What our job was to maintain the aircraft, so the aircraft could provide air cover for our soldiers on the ground. And but Balad Air Force Base was a well-known Air Force base during the first Persian Gulf War. The Saddam Hussein and his forces, that was the place where they launched their attack from their attacks to the Kurds. Their aircraft were all stationed out there, and that place was bombed very heavily when we attacked the first time. When the second time we again attacked these places, but most of their aircraft, most everything had been moved. In fact, they had buried a lot of their aircraft out in the desert. There was uncovered aircraft in the desert. They just didn't want them to blow up. But when we got there in 2006, they had already made significant repairs, but some of the bunkers and some of the hardened facilities still had huge blast holes in them. And so one of the places that we originally worked out of was a bunker that the doors had been blown off of, and they were still blown off of. And there was a big concrete patch in the roof of the building, but we had our little test station set up inside there, and there was a Scud missile outside of the front of that had been basically, it was dismantled and laying there, and it was said built in Yugoslavia, which at the time Yugoslavia didn't exist anymore, so it was at least a decade old. It was really, really kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And we were close enough to the southern gate that so basically where Balad was where resources would come into the country. So if they didn't bring them in from the coast, from Kuwait, they would fly them in, and Balad was that location because it was the largest secure facility where they could bring in transport aircraft. So, needless to say, Army and Marines would run their convoys out of that location. It was also called Camp Anaconda or Joint Base Balad. So all of these convoys would start there. They would just have truck after truck after truck after truck after truck, miles long. Well, when they would leave, every vehicle that had a weapon on it had to test their weapon to leave Camp Anaconda. And there was a berm, and we were maybe a quarter of a mile from the gate. And so we would hear gunfire pretty much all day as these convoys would go off. It was just a little bit disconcerting. But the first time we were there, it was also called Mortaritaville, just because we got mortared every day. So there would be mortars coming in. Now, by the time we were there, they had built up the defenses enough so that, for the most part, the system would be able to defend against mortars, so that the mortars weren't very well aimed, and they were just kind of thrown in, but the unexploded ordnance would land inside the facility, and that would have to be taken care of. But it was very rare that one would actually go off and harm anybody. Really, it was just a complete accident when it would damage something or harm someone. It did happen, but it was very rare. But more often is when they would fire rockets. So mortars every day, several times a day the first time we were there. But maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, they would fire a rocket in. And that was not as well defended, and they would come through and hit some stuff. And there was one time where I was asleep, and usually how it would go was there would be an explosion, and then the alarms would go off with a rocket. With the mortars, you'd hear the alarms go off, and then there'd be an explosion. But there was a very large explosion, and then the alarms went off, and I was asleep, and I kind of woke up and like trying to figure out what was going on. I just went back to sleep. Well, maybe about half hour later, there was a knock on my door of my little, well, they were called pods. Basically, they were transport containers that were modified into rooms. I got a knock on my door of my bunk, and they were asking if I was okay, because apparently the rocket was only about a couple hundred yards from where I was sleeping. So.
Before we conclude this interview, do you just have like any final thoughts or comments or anything else that you'd want to add? Just about anything, any of your experiences or anything with that?
Well, for the most part, most of my experiences were really positive.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest part, again, I would say, would be being gone from my family. Getting the opportunity to be a part of that is hard to really wrap my head around. Obviously, when I was there, I wasn't. I knew what we were doing and the mission that we were doing, and I knew the impact that it was having. Mm-hmm. But it's just like if you were a plumber or a mechanic, you show up and you do your job, and you make what you have to do, make happen. The experiences of traveling overseas and getting a chance to see some of the things that I got to see, spend time in different countries. Like, I was in Spain, I was in England, I was in Germany, I was in Qatar, I was in Cyprus, I was in Bahrain, I was in Kuwait, I was in Saudi Arabia, I was in Turkey. Even just briefly. So I guess the experience that I got from that can't really be replaced. Mm-hmm. The hard part is the things that I missed at home, and the thing that is very difficult is those that are left at home also serve in a way, because they are sacrificing something that they didn't volunteer for. All of the soldiers and airmen and Marines, they volunteered for that duty, but their spouses and their kids did not.
Yeah.
So that is they sacrifice and serve in a way that is seldom presented to people. So that is something that I am always extremely thankful for, is that how my family has supported me in that capacity. So.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. It's
no problem, Derek.
There's a lot of information here.
Well,
good.
Yeah, hopefully, I guess about 25 minutes. So.
Yeah, should be good. Yeah. All right.
I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but.